Now, immigrants fit into that, quite frankly, as well. So it's a high priority for us. There is no single priority other than creating jobs for Americans. Do we have a common interest with employers? We have absolutely a common interest with employers who are interested about having a real reform of the immigration system. Those employers that seek to take advantage of it, that I talked to you about, like the current system, where it's open yet it's closed, probably they won't join with us. But I think a vast group of Americans are saying, the system's broken, let's fix it, let's get everybody back to work, and let's create an economy that really does work for everybody. Listen, this is a question I like to ask anybody. You ever stop to wonder why the richest nation on the face of the earth, and we are the richest nation on the face of the earth, seems to be going backwards, where we can't fund education, where we can't fund pensions, where we can't come up with a way to give health care to everybody, when everybody else, every other industrialized country in the world has found a way to do it with less resources, with less money? You ever wonder about that? Well, I do. And it's been those policies that have prevented us from doing that. And immigration is one of those policies that allows people to take advantage and create a permanent underclass and drive down wages for everybody.
Thank you, sir. There are times, today is one, in which I think if the management of many American corporations were as sharp as that of American labor, we wouldn't be in some of the situations we are today. The question I have for you, one hears quite often that one of our most urgent problems is a short-term debt crisis. How would you respond to that? Thank you.
Yes. Well, here, let me put that in a frame as well, why that's important and how it plays out. We went into a recession a few years ago. That recession cost us 11 million jobs. We have 15 million people that are unemployed as we speak. We have 25 million that were considered unemployed, underemployed. That's either unemployed or working part-time when they want to work full-time. We have 6.5 million people who have been laid off longer than 6 months. That's the greatest number of long-term employment this country's seen, even greater number than we had in the Great Depression. Not a greater percentage, but a greater number. So what we've said is you have to stimulate the economy. Government must stimulate the economy to get the economy growing. Remember, there are 4 things that drive the economy. Consumer spending is at 72%. The second thing is business investment. Business is not investing right now because they're afraid to. The third is net exports. We don't have net exports. We have net imports by a large number. And the fourth is government spending. So government spending is necessary to spur the economy so that job growth can become ingrained and start to take root from the public and the private sector. So we just started to do that. We had a program last year, the president pushed for an economic stimulus program that actually saved a number of jobs, and saving jobs is important as creating jobs, quite frankly. So that is just starting to take root right now. The recovery is fragile. It hasn't produced any kind of job numbers that we'd like to see. Last month there were 490,000 jobs that were created. 450,000 were temporary jobs because of the consensus. Only 41,000 came from the public or the private sector. And so what you're dealing with is a very fragile recovery. So if you pull back on the stimulus, you end up pushing us back into a recession. Now, we have a 5-point program to bring us out of it. Point one is investing in infrastructure. We have a $2.2 trillion deficit, infrastructure deficit in this country. Roads, bridges, schools are all being run down because we haven't invested in them. Investing in them over the long term will create jobs and give us a world-class economy. Second part is extending unemployment benefits and health care benefits to the laid off. Remember I said we have 6.5 million people that are long-term laid off. If those benefits expire and 6.5 million people stop consuming, the economy will take a real broadside and it'll tip us back in the wrong direction. The third thing that we advocate is aid to state and local governments. Because, as I said, the four drivers, federal spending is up here right now to stimulate, but state spending is actually dropping. And the net effect is almost zeroed out right now. So that's not helping us the way it should. We need to get money to those states and local governments so that teachers, firefighters, and police officers don't get laid off, but just as importantly, so that those layoffs don't tip us back in to recession where we came from. The fourth thing is we'd like to see government create jobs directly. Let's assume you have a center city school that the students are having a tough time for whatever reason. The government could create tutors that would create a job that would help the economy. It would also solve a problem of helping us in those school districts. I know they're talking about having classrooms of 45. I mean, for God's sake, a classroom of 45 is not inducive to a good education. That just simply can't exist. And then the fifth thing that we advocate is sending the TARP money that was unused and repaid to regional banks so that regional banks can begin to loan to small and mid-sized companies and businesses so that they can create jobs. Now, all of that's necessary. And then you have the group of people, to answer your question the long way around, I apologize. People will say, but we have this deficit. We have this deficit, so we have to go on an austerity program. Now, let me tell you something. If you remember nothing else that I say today, remember this word, these words. The United States does not have a short-term deficit problem. We have a short-term jobs crisis. We may have a midterm or long-term deficit problem that we can get to, but now is not the time to go on an austerity program and tip us back in to a recession. Japan did that in the 1990s, and for 10 years, their economy started out and dropped back down, started out and dropped back down. Japan calls that the lost decade. Well, we can't afford a lost decade in this country. And so those that say that we have to do everything we can with the deficit short term are being very short-sighted. It is bad policy and, quite frankly, will lead us into a disaster. So what we need to do is continue creating jobs, extend unemployment benefits, send money to state and local governments, invest in infrastructure, get the TARP money to people to loan money, and create jobs in the process, and we can all grow out of this together. Because it doesn't have to be this way.
Mr. Trumka, you started out your talk today by speaking of a defeat of an important piece of pending legislation in Washington. And it pointed out the importance of every Democratic vote in the Senate, certainly, to break any kind of a proposed Republican filibuster. My question relates to the state of Arkansas, where just recently the AFL-CIO tried very hard financially to defeat a sitting Democratic senator. AFL-CIO was unsuccessful. That woman, Senator Lincoln, I believe, has been nominated. And my question is, recognizing the importance of every Democratic vote in the Senate, what does the AFL-CIO intend to do when the election is held in Arkansas? Will you support Senator Lincoln, notwithstanding your previous reservations? What are your plans?
Well, first of all, we don't support Democrats. We support people who support workers. And Blanche Lincoln wasn't one of those people.